shall be conducting this workshop regarding academic writing and referencing. The main aim behind doing this workshop is basically to get you to understand the notion of how you need to write academically in formal tone and how to properly reference your research and the different sources that you're going to use for your research work, for your papers, or any reports you're going to write in your assignments. So let's have a look at the learning outcomes of this workshop. First, we will start by defining academic writing, that is formal writing. We are going to have a look at the do's and the don'ts. We are going to look at what is referencing, a small introduction on referencing, defining referencing and in-text citation, which is also part of referencing. We are also going to have a look at Harvard and IEEE style of referencing, because that's what it's going to be required from you as a computer science or IT students. Where and how to use the in-text citation, and referencing different sources of information. So firstly, academic writing. What is academic writing? When we talk about academic writing, we are talking about a formal way of writing, whether it is in a research paper, in a report, in an essay, in any academic related report or assignments, we talk about academic writing. So how is academic writing done? First, we use a formal tone. For instance, we use the third person. We never use I, you, he, or she. If we are writing, we want to say, let's say, for example, instead of saying your opinion, we are going to say one's opinion. Instead of saying my own belief, we could say one's belief. We don't use any slang words or any abbreviations. We are going to see example later on. And when we are writing with an objective. So we are writing to inform the reader that we have an objective in mind, and whatever we are writing is going towards that objective, and that's what the following information will be about. Academic writing is also based on research and has citations. Specifically for presentations, when we are presenting our information, those information come from research work. And normally, common mistakes that students do, they forget to in-text cite their information. Even though these were research work, students forget to in-text cite where they get that information from. So we are going to learn how to do in-text citation based on the different sources that we have. When we are talking about academic writing, we are also talking about a clear and precise way of writing. Your information that you want to convey to your reader needs to be clear and precise. Clear in the extent that you are using simple English language where the reader understands what you want to convey. Precise in the sense that you're trying to get the precise information, the exact information that you want to convey to your reader. You're not beating around the bush, you're just coming to your point. Academic writing is often persuasive or argumentative. Students also often make the mistake of narrating in their report or their assignments. So when you're doing academic writing, you need to persuade the author about the point you're trying to make, or write in an argumentative way of writing, whether you are in a favor or against the motion, for example. Academic writing avoids cliches or questions which address the reader. When you're writing, never ask a question to the reader, such as, did you know that? Or, do you think that? When you're doing academic writing, you never ask questions. You always state. Academic writing is written in paragraphs with normally an introduction, the main body, and conclusion. Whether you're writing a literature review paper, or you're writing a research paper, you're writing a report or an essay, you always start by introducing your topic, then producing your main ideas in your main body, and having a conclusion. Even when doing a presentation, you always introduce yourself and your subject topics, followed by the main body, which are the main ideas of your presentation, and you end with a conclusion. What about practicing academic writing, that is formal writing? So the do's and don'ts. Here, we are going to have a look at an example of an informal and non-academic style paragraph. So this paragraph, as you can see, was written in a non-formal, as in a informal, non-academic style. So firstly, what you're going to notice is all the words written in green. As you can see, those words are informal words that you should not be using in your paragraphs. So for instance, instead of using it's, you have to say it is. Instead of using we're or they've, you have to be using we are or they have. Instead of using your files, you should be saying one's files. Instead of using isn't, it should be is not. Similarly, when you're writing in a formal way, normally we expect you not to be using we are or they've, but in certain special conditions, it might be that the piece of information you're trying to extract might be, for example, taken directly as a direct quote. But usually we tend to avoid using pronouns, personal pronouns. It's always in the third person that we try to write formally. So now let's have a look at a formal paragraph, what it's like. So as you can read, this paragraph has been written in a formal and professional academic style writing. So let's take a minute to read this paragraph and understand the way in which it was written. One important aspect when you're writing formally, you need to ensure that you're using the necessary connectives in your paragraphs. For instance, if we use this example, you can see that several connectives have been used, for example, notably, consequently, etc. So these connectives help us to move from one statement or one idea from another flawlessly. Moving on to the next part of this workshop is about referencing. So most of the time, students encounter difficulty when it comes to referencing. So what is referencing? Referencing normally is broken down into two parts. We have full referencing and we have in-text citation. So how are they different? The basic concept of referencing is about acknowledging the work of other people in your own work. For instance, using an idea or information from another source, for example, a journal, a book, a website, and giving credits where this information was collected. So for instance, if you have information from another source, example, the internet, a journal, or a book, you are well aware that this information is not yours. So how do you include the person's work in your own work? That's why referencing exists. So you acknowledge that the work has not been done by yourself, but has been done by someone else, but you are referencing that person in your work. So one way of referencing is having in-text citations. So what are in-text citations? These are used in the text of your essay and show the reader where you have got your information or facts from. That is either from a book, a journal article, or a web page. So for instance, they should be used whenever you quote or paraphrase information in your work. So normally there are two ways of using citations in your work. As I said, either it is in-text citation or you use them at the end of your essay, which is in the reference list, which we are going to have a look at. So in-text citation, mainly they are used in between your paragraphs, where you cite only the author's name and the year in which the article was published or the information was published. However, one thing to note is in-text citation is going to be different based on the referencing style that you're going to use. In our case, we will be using Harvard and IEEE referencing style, and we are going to see how the in-text citations vary from style to style. So first, we have the Harvard referencing style, which is course-specific. For instance, as computer science and IT students, we usually use either the Harvard referencing style or the IEEE referencing style. And it is very important that you make sure to ask your lecturer which specific referencing style you will need to use for your assignments. Sometimes it may be Harvard, sometimes it may be IEEE. So it is very important that from the very start of the course, you inquire about the referencing style that you will need to use. So Harvard referencing style has some basic rules of its own. For instance, if we have a look at its in-text citation, normally we in-text cite only the author's name and the year of publication. When we are using the author's name, we are using the author's surname only, which is its last name, and the year the article was published. Second rule is about the bibliography, which is also called the reference list, which is always at the end of your assignment, your presentation, or a research paper. So for instance, if we take presentation, your bibliography is going to be on the last slide. When we are using Harvard referencing style, we need to ensure that the reference list, also called the bibliography, is in alphabetical order. So these are the two basic rules when we are using Harvard referencing style. So let's have a look at in-text citation with one author only. Notice the difference between the first and the second statement. Have you noticed the difference? In the first sentence, as you can see, it is only the year of publication that is in between brackets. Why is it that way? It's because the source of information has been written in between the sentence. So for example, if I read the sentence, it would be according to the author's name, surname. So you open brackets, you put the year, and you close brackets and you continue the sentence. While on the other hand, if you look at the second sentence, the statement has already been inserted, and at the end of the sentence, you quote the author. So to resume, when the author or when the source is cited in between sentence, you need to only bracket the year of publication. However, when you're writing the whole sentence and you're ending the sentence with the quotation of the source, the whole author's surname plus the year of publication is put in between brackets. So just a reminder or just a refresher, when you're writing the author's name, surname, and year, so in other words, when you're writing the in-text citation in between the sentence, it is only the year of publication that is in between brackets. However, when you're writing the statement and you're ending your sentence with an in-text citation, both the author's surname and the year of publications are written in between brackets. So this example was for one author only. What happens when you have two or more authors? So in text citation example, when you have two or three authors, it is the same principle. If the in-text citation is written in between the sentence, only the year of publication is going to be in between brackets. However, if you're ending the sentence with the in-text citation, the whole in-text citation, including the author's surname with the year of publications, are going to be in between brackets. Now, this rule applies, or I should say, this is an example of an in-text citation with two or three authors. What if we have more than three authors, for example, 4, 5, 6? Are we to write all the author's surname, or we have an option for that? As you guessed right, we do have an option for it. So in text citation with more than three authors, you normally just state the first author's surname and followed by AL. So for example, if I'm to read the first statement, according to Smith AL, you open your brackets, you input the year of publication, you close brackets. The importance of cybersecurity in modern computer system cannot be overstated. And if ever you are trying to end the sentence with a citation, it's going to be all of the citation in between brackets. One common mistake that students also do, especially when they are doing presentation, is referencing their pictures. It is very important, just like you are referencing any sources or text of information from a website, you need to equally reference a picture that you've taken from the internet. So how do you reference this? It is simply, you search for your picture, and beneath your picture, you're going to have the title of the web page. So for example, I have gotten this picture from Forbes website, and the title of the web page was Why Cybersecurity Should Be Top of Mind in 2023. So I put the title, and in between brackets, who wrote the article. So it was Jotwani 2023. So based on whatever you have or wherever you have got your picture, you would write the source over there. Now, let's have a look at the full reference list, how the referencing are written. So this kind of referencing pattern will be found in your reference list, which is at the end of your report. So for instance, the first source we are going to have a look at is the journal article, which is printed. One thing that you need to remember about Harvard is in the reference list, we always use only the surname and the initial of the author. Again, we use only the surname and the initial. When we talk about the initial, we do not write the full first name of the author. It is only the initial. So as you can see in the example, you have the surname followed by the initial. In between brackets, you're going to have the year of publication, followed by the title of the article. And one more thing I would like to point out, whenever you're using articles, whether it is printed or an electronic article, the title of the journal is always in italics. You're going to see more example when we will move on. So we have title of article, followed by title of journal, issue information, and page reference. It is important for you to have your page reference so that the author knows where you have got your information at. So specifically, which pages did you use to get your research or information? All right. So this example was for a printed journal article. What about an article you have found online? So journal article, electronic with URL, it is the same principle, except that you are going to have a website link to the article and an access date. One important information to notice is if ever you're trying to get information from any online sources, you will always need to use the access date. Why? Because the access date gives accurate information when you try to access the source. So for instance, as you can see, everything remains unchanged, except that there is two additional information that you need to add, which is the website link to the article and the access date on which the article was accessed. I'm going to repeat it. Whichever website or online source you're going to use, it is always going to have an access date. So as mentioned, any website sources or online sources should include an access date. Let's move on to website or web pages now. So as you can see, web pages with individual authors, you're going to have the surname of the author, the initial, the year that the article or the site was published, the title of the website, followed by the URL and the access date, as we have noticed. So sometimes you do not have authors specifically for a website, which happens to be that it is the organization themselves who are the authors of the article. So in that case, the organization itself is going to be the author, followed by the year of publication, followed by the title, and followed by the URL and the access date. What happens now if ever you have a web page, but with no authors at all? You just have a web page over there. So then you're just going to look at the title of the web page, the year of publication, and the link to that web page, followed by the access date. Sometimes you do have web pages with no dates. Let's say, for example, either they don't have any authors or they don't have a date. So what happens is you just have to put the author or the title of the web page or the organization, followed by no date. Then you have the title of the web page, followed by the URL and the access date. Let's move on to the IEEE style of referencing. So compared to Harvard, IEEE style of referencing is more direct and less complicated. So here are the basic rules of IEEE referencing style. First, if we look at the in-text citation, each reference number should be enclosed in square brackets on the same line as the text before any punctuation with a space before the bracket. Second, if we look at the bibliography, the list is comprised of the sequential enumerated citation. So for example, if we have a paragraph, we have our first citation denoted by number 1 in between brackets. We have our second citation denoted by number 2 in between brackets. And we have third citation denoted by number 3 in between brackets. So when we are starting our bibliography, we shall have number 1 in between brackets with the full reference, number 2 followed by number 3. We're going to have a look at the example in a while. And one thing that you need to remember, unlike Harvard referencing, IEEE does not need to be alphabetical. And thirdly, the indentation of the paragraphs are very important. So these are some examples of in-text citation when using IEEE referencing. And as you can see, we do not use author's name and year in the in-text citation. Rather, we use numbers. If you want to use author, it's going to be, for example, Scholz, which is the author's surname, and number 2. This is optional. You can use it while you don't need to use it. Now, let's say, for example, you are citing information from several studies. So in between, when you're writing in between sentences, you need to ensure that you're writing the numbers followed by commas. So note that authors and dates do not have to be written out after the first reference. Use the bracketed number. It is also not necessary to write in reference to number 2. You can just write in number 2. So as mentioned, you don't need to say, for example, according to point with reference number 2, you just need to write see, for example, 2, and simply you can just write your index citation just like that. So the preferred method to cite more than one source at a time is to list each reference in its own brackets, then separate with a comma or a dash. So unlike if ever you're not mentioning several studies at the same time, you can mention it in separated bracketed numbers separated by commas, as you can see in the example. So let's have a look at the full reference way of the different sources using IEEE. So first we have printed article. Let's look at the right-hand side where it gives us an idea of how to proceed with the referencing. These texts have been adapted from Cite Them Right, where you can get more information about the different sources and how you cite them differently. So for instance, if we are using a printed article, you always start with the reference number in between brackets. So here, unlike Harvard referencing, we start by the initial of the author, followed by the surname. Again, you need to write only the initial of the first name of the author, followed by the full surname of the author. You're going to have the title of the article, followed by the title of the journal, always in italics, followed by the volume, the issue number, and the pages you have used. And here, you have to write in terms of date, the abbreviated month day, and the year of publication. Sometimes you may have the day or you do not. In the example on the left-hand side, in still printed article, as you can see, we don't have a specific day for the date. It is just December abbreviated 1963. What about electronic journals with URL now? So it is pretty much the same thing, except that you have an access date. But now the access date will be written differently compared to Harvard referencing style. So here you're going to have, before the access date, you will still have abbreviated month or day. When you have already completed the first part of the referencing, you have the access date on which the information was accessed, followed by whether the information was online, whether it was a podcast or a video. In this example, it is online, and available at, followed by the URL. So this is the example of printed article and referencing electronic journals with URL. Moving on, let's have a look at what about we reference web pages with individual authors. So websites is no different from articles, except that when we are referencing a website, we are just going to have title of the web page and title of the website. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we still start by the initial, followed by the surname, followed by the title of the web page, then the title of the website, which is always in italics. We have the access date. And as you can see, as a reminder, the access date is always abbreviated. You never write the full form of the day, of the month, sorry. So then you have the available URL. So here what you need to remember is we still have the access date. We don't have the access of the year in which the article was published. You have only the access date in which you access the article. So reminder, you never put, when you're using information from a website or an online source, you never put the year of publication of the information. You always put the access date on which you access the information. Similarly, a web page with no authors, it is going to be the same thing, except that here, you're not going to have any author. You will go directly to the title of the web page in between inverted commas, followed by the title of the website, always in its links, followed by the date on which you access the resources, and available URL. So it is important to note the indent text of entries. So as you can see, all the information, so first you have the reference number, which is on the left-hand side, followed by the information. And as you can see, the information is written one under the other. So you have to set up your indent text so that the information is produced in that similar indentation. That's it from me. If ever you want to have more information about how to do referencing with different sources, you may go on the site Cite Them Right online for you to have in-text citation examples and reference list, whether it is Harvard or IEEE, regarding the different sources of information.